Welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started today. So, my name is Chris Jones. I am a professor here at University of Cincinnati College of Business. I have the pleasure of introducing Michelle Grimm. So a little bit about Michelle. She is a Vice President and Senior Director of Conversational AI with 23 years of experience at Fifth Third Bank in various roles including retail branch management, communications, culture, program, project delivery, agility, tech strategy, operations support. She's done it all, right? Today, Michelle leads a cross-functional team that drives the strategy for customer channel value stream and the messaging platform. Michelle earned a bachelor's degree in public relations from the University of Dayton. She lives in Fort Thomas, Kentucky with her husband, Brady, and their 2 kids. So let's give her a round of applause as she tells us about the story.
So this is, I'll try to do my best to walk around. So he's actually taken a lot of my next slide to tell you a little bit about myself. What is interesting and probably a little bit different than maybe some of the other speakers you hear from today is a little bit of what I'm not. I am not a data scientist. I'm not a mathematician. I hated statistics in college. So that's not me. But what I can do is talk to you today about is the practical use cases and why I think it's so important to have all these items as we are trying to build out products and services for our customers. So while I am not those things, I surround myself with those people because it's not my strength, but I know what we need to deliver and what we're trying to do, and I need the modeling, and I need the data, and I need all that information from people way smarter than me to help build out a product. So as Chris said, a little bit about myself. 23 years at Fifth Third. I've been a lifer. I started in college. I was a summer flyer as a teller. Went through all kinds of roles inside the branches. If anybody wants to hear crazy banking stories and crazy customers, I've got them. But it's really the foundation of who I am. So even today, as I am building out and we're working through products and services at Fifth Third, I think back to that time that, Mr. Jones came in and his wife just died and he needed my help. So my job is to figure out how do we help our customers when they are having a problem. Because I would love to say we build everything perfectly, but we don't. And then they come to us and say, okay, I need help. So we're trying to build the solutions to help people. So went to the University of Dayton, so go Flyers. But I will say my dad is a proud graduate of UC, lots of UC alum in my family. I am also a proud West Sider, so if there's any West Siders. However, I was transported, my husband got me to move to Fort Thomas, Kentucky, which I actually just say it's just a smaller version of the West Side. So we just went to the pumpkin patch last week, so that's my family there. 2 kids, 10 and 8, so I can also talk a lot about the challenges of raising kids that age. Last night, I was trying to do math homework with my son. They teach it way differently than when I was in school, and he was not grasping it, and I wasn't grasping it. It was real fun. So, a little bit about Fifth Third for those local. You can see here, I'm not going to really talk about it. Has everyone heard of Fifth Third? Everyone in the room for Cincinnati? Cool. I like to show this just because it does at least show the map of where we are. Some people don't realize the different states that we're in, but it's really fun, and we continue to grow and grow our footprint. So one of the big things I think that's really important when you're thinking about data, when you're thinking about modeling, we just heard Reagan say about that, how many times have you built a model that didn't get used? And I would say, is with my product mindset, a lot of that is because you weren't actually aware of the problem you were trying to solve. And I think a lot of that is really important, and I start preaching a lot to people of why? Why are we doing this? What is your problem? So then we can start moving from there. And that's a lot of where I started. So I was asked 2 years ago to lead something called our customer channel value stream within the organization. And this really started out as the problem our executives were trying to solve was, we have a lot of waste. Lean's, if anyone's familiar with Lean Six Sigma and process improvement, there was a lot of thought of, okay, where are there opportunities for her to lean out waste? And for years, and I'm sure our corporation is not alone, we build products and services, and we have de-scoped items, as time, money, things start to run out. And we just said, you know what, our operations team, they'll figure it out. Our customer service team, our contact center, they'll just handle that extra piece that we didn't fully finish the play on. And over the years, those items have built up. And what we found is we had a situation where we were starting to get about a month, we had about 700,000 phone calls a month that were getting to our consumer contact center where customers were saying, hey, I need help with this, I don't understand this. And our executives start to say why that seems like a lot. So we want to have this customer channel value stream. And oh, by the way, Michelle and my friend Whitney, you guys are going to help lead it. You're going to help us figure out where are the problems and how can we solve it. So we came up with this. We thought it was important. We need to understand what are all the elements when our customers have a problem or service, with a problem with our product or service rather, how are they interacting with us? Where might they go? They might go at the online or mobile channel, and this is kind of our funnel that we created, and it's kind of the beacon of why we're doing what we're doing. They may pick up the phone and call, and if you pick up the phone and call, you're gonna interact with our IVR first. And if you don't interact with our IVR, then you're gonna go all the way to towards the bottom, that CCC phone agent. Oh, by the way, also within our online and mobile channel, we now have this thing called the Chatbot. We have a messaging platform. So you can log in, you can go, and there's a little icon, you can click and ask for help there. You would go to our Chatbot Jeanie and then go through our messaging agent. And so we started to say, what are the reasons? How might we avoid contacts? How do we enable self-service? How might we use AI? But one of the big questions we started asking ourselves was, and our CEO Tim right away, was we've had this Jeanie and this chatbot out there, but it's not performing like we think it should be. What's going on? What did we do different? What did we do wrong? So part of our value stream and part of what we had to look at, a big chunk of work for the last 2 years, is how do we improve this? What did we do wrong and what should we do differently? So that gets us into the messaging of Jeanie. I could talk all about all the channels if anyone has questions. And also I should have said, feel free, stop me, ask questions. I don't want to just talk to people the whole time, so feel free to stop me. So what I want to do before I jump into Jeanie, where she is today, for those who are in Cincinnati and have been around for a long time, I want to look at kind of a little note of Jeannie's past. Jeanie was our first the first network of ATMs launched in 1977. So the ATM existed in other areas of the country, but network of ATMs that actually connected and talked to each other, Fifth Third was the first, and that was the logo up there. And I like to laugh a little bit because getting money out of an ATM was such a foreign concept. We actually had a job at the bank called a Jeanie girl, and I know this because when I was a branch manager, I worked with somebody who was a Jeanie girl at one point in her career, and her sole job was to get people to use the ATM and figure out how to get money out of the ATM, which is fascinating when you think about today, we're talking about large language models and tech doing things for us. People not that long ago didn't understand how to get the money out of the ATM, right? So a couple other fun facts about Jeanie, because I love that we have continued our chatbot and the continuation of this. Jeanie, the name came from actually the developer at Fifth Third who was developing his wife's name was Jeanie. It was a combination of his wife's name and at the time I Dream of Jeanie was popular TV show. So that's what combined it. Another thing, one of our big use cases, so we have a historian on our staff, and one of the other use cases that they thought about calling Jeanie was mom, because the thought process was mom's always willing to give you a few extra bucks. That did not test well, so Jeanie was born. And what we love to say is that, and I'll show a demo of this later, but if you actually go into our chatbot and ask Jeanie, how do you get your name, how she got her name, we throw back to, I was the first ATM network, but now I'm just providing, my AI has evolved and my technology has grown and I'm going to help you in a new way. So it's really fun for us to continue that legacy. So messaging. So you'll see here, I'm sure everyone, how many people have used a chatbot? Yeah. I use them a lot. I actually seek them out from other companies before I have to pick up the phone and call. Like I said, 8-year-old, 10-year-old, I don't have a lot of time to sit on the phone. I'd rather just chat if I can. I actually did it yesterday with Scholastic, something, right? I want to be quick, I want to multitask. It's kind of the world we're living in. So this is where our Jeanie icon is, and I will say, if you are a Fifth Third customer, this is what it looks like today. And next month, we are actually changing the icon. We're changing the color, doing some graphic differences here. But couple of components that I would like to really call out from people from a messaging, because I think about it in 4 ways and I want to show the components. The first one is that NLU, the natural language understanding, or what I refer to as the brain of Jeanie, and this is where a lot of the modeling takes place. So that brain is how you know when a customer types in, I want to order a new debit card or order a new credit card. That model is what is interpreting, this is what the customer wants to do. This is ordering a new debit card. I'll talk a little bit about it on the next slide, but when we first launched Jeanie, so it was in the height of the pandemic, we were testing it and piloting messaging in a very small portion of our markets, like 1% I think in Atlanta, just testing it out. The pandemic happened. Our call center got killed with customers wanting to talk to them. We talked about, the necessary employees. No one was really talking about banking. Customers were freaked out, worried about their money. They were calling banks a lot. Our contact center could not keep up with it. So we fast-tracked our messaging platform and just launched it for everybody. And at the time, our agents were taking 6 concurrent conversations for every 1 phone call. So they were taking 6 messages at one time. The NLU, we quickly tried to get some functionality for the chatbot out there to try to mitigate some of those conversations. But what we did is we, over time, we had some things, but we didn't spend the time we needed to really put the right structure in place. We had 35 intents out there of thinking about an intent is something that you want to do. I want to order a new debit card. I have a dispute on my account. Right, we had 35 out there that was trained on 3,000 training phrases. So 3,000 ways that you could say those 35 intents. What we found, and I'm kind of stealing into my next slide here, but we were only accurate 25% of the time. So think about the NLU is all the modeling that's put behind the scenes to make that happen. From there, once I know what a customer wants to do, I have to build out the flow of what Jeanie is going to say back. Now, we've talked a lot about, there's talks about could large language models do that for you in the future? Absolutely, but also, as Grimm was saying, I work at a bank, highly regulated. We're not gonna be putting that in front of a customer anytime soon. So we have people behind the scenes who are literally flowing and flow charts, and I'll show an example of what is that path that we want a customer to get through. And we are basing that off of largely of our policies and procedures that our agents have to follow today in the contact center. So looking at how would a person solve this problem? Now how can Jeanie solve that problem for the customer? Once that flow is designed, we have bot builds and integrations. So we have a team of developers who then builds out the bot within our platform, and then also looks at ways that we need to integrate it into our back-end systems. So if I want to pull up what's the balance on your account, cool, I can build the bot to say the right things in the right order to recognize it, but then I have to go into our back-end data management system that's pulling that balance that's similar to what's in the mobile app. So we have engineers looking through the right ways to do that. And then finally, near and dear to my heart, the messaging agent enablement. This is a piece that we often forget because the cool, sexy thing is to talk about the chatbot, but it's just as important to look at that agent experience. And I will tell you, when we first started looking down the path of, hey, we need to look at what we were doing with Jeanie before, I went and sat with a lot of our agents. And a lot of them said to me, please tell me you're gonna take the humor out of her. And I was like, what do you mean? Originally, a lot of the content and that conversational flow was designed by our marketing department. Not the right spin when you're having a problem with your money and somebody's pissed off because something's not right or money was taken out, and you're saying, and you're having problems sending money with Zelle or what have you, and somebody says, great, somebody's gonna be happy to get money from you. Doesn't go over very well. So our agents very quickly were able to tell us, we did the focus groups and say, here are the problems that we are actually seeing with the bot, because by the time the customer gets to us, they are not happy and they don't want to talk to me, right? So we did a lot of that research as well, just to get that user feedback. So I talked about this a little bit. We refer to her as Jeanie 1.0, and yes, I do refer to her with female pronouns. I think of her like a person because we did design a lot of the content like a human would say. So again, 35 trained customer intents, 3,000 utterances. She was only accurate 25% of the time. So that NLU model, only 25% of the time when we said, when we just assumed if you typed in something like, I want to order a debit card, it may have triggered into debit card activation. not exactly the same thing, right? So we were only accurate 25% of the time. We just assumed we put you down that flow, a customer got stuck in a loop. Then by the time they got to a customer or to the agent, not a great experience. And one of the things that you'll see out there in studies is that this NLU, not being able to recognize what a customer wants to do, are customers' biggest frustration with chatbots in general. And it's because the chatbot doesn't understand what the customer is saying to them in typing. So this modeling behind the scenes is extremely important. I'm using Zelle as my example. How many people are familiar with Zelle? It's the bank version of Venmo. But Zelle is one of those things, it's one of our top intents that people, believe it or not, come into our chatbot for. Because you're already in the mobile app, you're trying to do something electronically, you don't really want to pick up the phone and call. It's not one of our top intents on the phone, which is I find really interesting. But it's one of our top ones. Before we had one intent for Zelle, it was Zelle help. And a lot of what we were doing before was how-to instructions. Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
So back to your point about the 25% accuracy of the NLU and the fact that you branded the agent Jeanie. How did you guys have a conversation internally about should we be, open to our customers that you're interacting with a bot versus you're actually interacting with somebody with the name Jeanie? Because if you go back to 1977, right, you said people didn't know how to do this thing. If somebody's using the phone for, and doing it for the first time, they're probably thinking there's somebody on the other side, like a human on the other side doing it. So did you have that kind of a dialogue as to whether to brand a bot versus not?
We absolutely did. So that's a great point. We actually, in the very first Jeanie 1.0, we didn't call out that Jeanie was virtual assistant. And one of the first things we do now, and I'll show a demo of it, the very first sentence that pops up was, "Hi, thank you for messaging with us. I am Jeanie, your virtual assistant." Because what we found is everybody else was doing that already, and we called it out. So yes, very specifically, we are very clear that it is a virtual assistant. And then we're gonna actually make it in our iterations coming this year. One of the things that we're looking to do to make it even clearer within like the iconography that we have within our chat window. So we're looking at right now it has our little chat bubble if it's Jeanie. In the future, if you're talking to an agent, we're gonna put person profile. Try to distinguish it even more, person versus a bot. So yes. Yeah.
Do you still call it a chatbot for your customers? Some companies are going away from it because of the historical bad.
Yeah, we don't necessarily for our customer facing, we call it a virtual assistant. Because ideally, this is step one of the evolution of helping serve what we wanna do in the future. I want Jeanie to be able to do things on behalf of you. So right now, and this is jumping ahead a little bit, but that's all right. Right now, if you go in, I'm gonna point you to the right place in the app to accomplish the task if you wanna transfer funds, for example. Gonna give you a feature link, click on it, it'll put you back into the app in the exact place you need to transfer funds. In the future, what I wanna get to is where Jeanie is actually transferring the funds for you. So we wanna keep that virtual assistant more because that's really what we want it to be in the future. Yeah.
So you mentioned when you rolled out the ATMs back in whatever that was, that you had the Jeanie girls because you knew people wouldn't be able to use it. How does that 25% accuracy compare to your expectations when you guys rolled this out? So did you guys think it would be 100% accurate? Or did you guys, were you guys thrilled with 25% because you expected less? Like where were your
I don't think we
expectations?
actually knew it was 25% at the time, to be honest. We just ran. And then it wasn't until we started to get asked what's going on that we stepped back and said, how are we measuring this? Because we were going off of metrics from our vendor that I don't know that we necessarily trusted. So that's when we brought in data scientists to say, help us figure out what's going on. I think we thought our accuracy was much higher. And it wasn't until we actually, and it was, what was triggering higher is because it was classifying it, but it wasn't classifying it accurately. So we just saw, oh, it's classification hit, good, move on. And so it wasn't until after that.
Just out of curiosity, when you first went live, did you go live with 35 intents or did you actually gradually build that up to 35?
That's a great question. I think we gradually built to 35. I was not actually around at that time. I was more on our operations side and IT strategy at the time, so I don't know for sure.
Okay.
But I know we built up to 35. We added, so I know we didn't go live with it.
What was your original timeline if you were only in 1% of the market and then went to all? How long was the progression gonna be?
It was quick because we just had to release it because of the pandemic. So it was a matter of a couple months that we went from 1% to everybody. And it was mainly because the pandemic hit and we had to. That would not have been probably what we wanted to do initially. So it's hard to say. And again, I wasn't part of the team when we did that piece, so.
Did you have trouble getting buy-in in terms of budget and more importantly, in terms of from the development team?
Yeah, that's a great question. From a budget standpoint, I think we saw this is where some of the future was going. And like I said, I was not there for all of those discussions initially, but we had to build out the business case just like anything else. And we felt like the business case was there. And I will tell you that even if we didn't have the bot in front of it, we did see benefit immediately because if you think about the concurrency of conversations that our agents are able to handle on the back end, like I said, we went to 6. I would never recommend going to 6. We're at between 3 and 4 now. But because of that, we were able to drop almost immediately 225,000 phone calls a month that went over to messaging, and that alone built out the business case for us.
Thank you.
Something like the Zelle help intent, do you have feedback paths where you data mine that activity to determine if there are issues either with the Zelle process or the Zelle instructions or?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's actually where we're at now, is looking at what are customers coming in with. We actually had a situation happen, it was about 2-3 weeks ago, where our product team had sent out a letter or something. There was a social security number compromise that happened, and we sent out letters saying, hey, around this, there was a compromise. Here's the free identity alert product or something that came out. We saw a spike in messages come up that were talking about the social security number compromise. And then we were able to do some analysis that we didn't actually have our flow built yet for identity alert. Customers were getting stuck in what to do. So we are using the analytics of what are customers coming in, or we're starting to have those conversations of if there's a tech problem, right, or customers, is there a rise? And I will tell you, early on, even before we did this, there was something called an oops error, where customers were getting an oops error somewhere within our mobile app. And so we started to see a spike, not only in calls and messages of customers coming in saying, I'm getting this oops error. And we were able to track that volume and say, okay, what's going on? And we were able to say, raise it to the right of department that put in something that caused us, like, this is a problem. So what we were doing with this once we realized that we were only at 25% accuracy, we started to do a bunch of topic modeling. So we took those 225,000 conversations that were coming in a month, and we did advanced topic modeling to say, what are the rate intents that we should be going after? Is it the 35? What are customers asking about the most? Is one Zelle help right? So we started to do all of those things, and we took a multi-layer approach. And where we really ended up in 2023, once we went live, is that 35 trained intents, we went to 150. I will tell you, our initial model, we had 156, but after we went live, we continued to tune our NLU and decided, hey, these 2 intents are too similar, it's causing problems, customers are hitting back and forth, we need to drop them and combine them into one. So we did some of that tuning. We then also trained it on 30,000 synthetic utterances. So we actually built out for 1 million utterances to train those 150 intents. The 30,000 was a limitation of our vendor, so we went with that. But what were the ways to get those to those 30,000 utterances? We did use real customer utterances that were coming in, but we also used, at the time, it was GPT-3, and said, give me 100 ways to say I want to order a new debit card. And by the way, includes spelling errors because customers often fat finger things, right? So we did that to, they say work smarter, not harder. I mean, because otherwise, before the large language model, we just would all sat in a room and said, yep, these utterances are the right ones. So saved a lot of time there. What we found with this multi-layered model that we put in, we are now at 90% accuracy. So I'll show a little more details about this, but we are averaging, and we know now that we are accurate because one of the very first things we do in our chatbot, once a customer types in, we classify it, but we don't just assume our classification is right. We say, it sounds like you want to talk about ordering a new debit card. Is that correct? The customer has to hit yes or no. That yes button is where we're getting our 90% accuracy. So again, kind of to the question earlier, we took on and said, we don't really love just relying on the metrics we're being given. We want to take it to the next level and say, okay, how do we make this better? And then that Zell help, we broke that into 11 intents. So we went from 1 to 11 because it can be nuanced of what customers want to do, and then let's build out the right flows. Couple of other things I like to call out that we did. So I talked about the feature links. So instead of just how-to instructions, we were able to find ways that we could get you into the right part of the app to help self-serve. Not just, okay, now click this, click this, click this. It's click this link and we're gonna get you there. We're not gonna give you the instructions. Yeah.
How do the customer intents that you've trained the model on compare to the processes and tasks that you train your human service agents on?
They're very similar. Right, so if you look at, if when we're going to build out flows, because we'll go in and I talk to our BAs in our call center and I'll say, okay, what are we instructing agents to do in this situation? It's very similar, they're very aligned, they're all common tasks. As someone who worked in a branch, I will tell you when customers have a problem, it's what it is. We also actually look a lot too with the phone call volume, so I showed you the funnel. We're looking at the types of things customers are calling about as well, so it's similar aligned. Yeah.
So 30,000 means what percentage of the customer base it has been trained?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that.
What percentage of the customers? Like you mentioned 30,000 customers used in training, right?
The 30,000 training phrases?
Yeah.
Yeah, these are for all consumer customers, right?
All consumers.
Yeah, so we are using, this is open to all our entire consumer base, so like you or I doing personal. We're not in our private bank segment, which is a higher tier level customer. We're not in our commercial area, so it's all the consumer, personal type
The retail.
needs.
Is this a typical progression for a company who wants a chatbot to go from 25% accuracy to 90%? Like, it seems like you need the 25% to get to the 90%.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know 100% what's typical just because it is such a newer space and the studies is going on. And I will also tell you, it is a little bit harder to get information from people. We're doing benchmark studies with other peers. Kinova is a study that we do to see what are they doing within their chatbots. And I would tell you, I think you're right because a lot of what I'm seeing from what others are doing, they put something out there. A lot of times it was largely a knowledge-based type chatbot of like Q&A, if you will, a big Q&A bot. And we're starting to see the shift of people developing more of this complexity of like, oh, I'll really understand what you're trying to do now and try to help you do it, which I think is a shift from that Q&A type bot that initially went out. So I think you're right. The other thing I will tell you too that I saw, I can tell that people are working on, once you have the model, like that's the easy part. The hard part's actually then building out what do you do. That's really lengthy. So I'll often go in, I have to do these walk the walls quarterly with our CEO and other executives. And one of the things that they get really excited, we call it bot shaming. It's really not, but I go into other financial institutions. I'm harvesting from everybody like, all right, who has accounts at other banks? I need you to type this in and we need to see what happens. One of the interesting things I saw was last quarter, the quarter before, Chase, a lot of times they recognized what we were trying to do. They just didn't have the flow built out to do anything. And what I thought was super interesting, so they really upped their NLU again. But what I thought was super interesting, I would say, I recognize that you need help with Zell. Unfortunately, we're still working on building out the functionality to help you with that. So they were super transparent that they are currently, which I kind of love, like they're currently working on it, come back, we'll have more information for you at another time. Yeah.
So kind of as you're going through all these different utterances and conversations, are you actually extracting any new services or any kind of like information that says, hey, we didn't even know you guys want to do this, but now this could be something that you'd add to
Yeah.
your roadmap and so forth in the
Yeah.
future?
100%. So one of the things that we talk about a lot is, so we're doing a lot of modernization efforts like most companies. We're working on, today, like if you wanted to redeem a certificate of deposit, like it's kind of like an old school product for banking. The only way to do it is to physically go into a branch. Today, we're working on making it digitized, in the next, like, it's less than a year, but like where you'd be able to do it yourself. And we've been talking a lot internally, when we do make certain product enhancements, we need to watch, because right now, something with the CD is not in our NLU because it wasn't triggered much 2 years ago. But we're looking at, do we need to account for it, right? Like, we purposely, like notary services is something that we offer in our branches, but we didn't build it into our NLU because it's so far, like, we get asked about it maybe once a month. Compared to disputed transaction, which I get asked about 30,000 times a month, right? It just wasn't worth building it, but yes, we are constantly looking at that.
So Michelle, so looking at the reason why I chose this was because I actually had a real experience with this recently.
Oh.
I'm doing customer with Third.
Well, thank
It
you.
was a multi-dimensional ask. So
Yes.
it was, I need to add an external account.
Yep.
And for some reason, I'm not sure if I should add them as a payee.
Yep.
And I couldn't figure out how to ask it, so I spent about 5 minutes keep asking it, and it kept dead ending, you know what I
You
mean?
just got to a person.
Yeah, and then finally I got to a person, and I was like, okay, how do I get smart enough to figure out how to ask something this multi-dimensional?
So that is a great point. Our NLU is limited, a multi-intent, it's not gonna pick up. Or at best, it's gonna pick up one of the two, right? So, and that's the limit of traditional NLU and the modeling. What we do believe, though, the future, what we wanna get to is we wanna back our NLU with large language model. Again, governance, all that fun stuff. But we hope to get there in the next year, and we think that we are seeing better success rate. It won't fully do it, right? But we are seeing better success rate with getting at least a recognition of some of the intent, versus right now, it's not great. The model just doesn't recognize two intents at once. And you're just right, we do see customers who come in and write a book in that first intent. You see some customers who just put one thing and it's really clear.
So are you taking, like, that scenario that I used, are you then taking that data and saying this is why she ended up in a space?
Yep.
Okay.
So we have a team that our team actually spends 30 minutes every day reviewing real life customer conversations. Did it happen the way we expected to? Did the bot get us where we wanted? Like, we're in a pretty good spot now, but when we were still, especially early days when we launched in April of 2023, making sure that our NLU was classifying the right way, we would take that information to tweak the NLU, right, and do all of that stuff. So yeah, we are looking at that.
And then one last question. So then do you have the traceability to how the call is filing disposition with the customer rep?
For a call or for a message once it gets to an agent?
So let's say I was finally ended up with the agent, right? Do you then look back at, well, how did she eventually reason, what was the
Yeah.
issue of original intent?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we do look at that too. Yeah. Couple other things that we added in, transparent wait times to get to an agent. So before, if you sat in and you had to get to a person, you had no idea how long it was gonna take. Now we're at least giving you an average. You can expect 3 minutes, you can expect 5 minutes if we're busy, right? We also have a virtual lobby. So I love this. I was skeptical at first, but I mentioned our agents have these queues where they're waiting, like they have like 4 people at a time. What often happens too is a 10-year-old, she bothers me at some point while I'm trying to get something done. I may walk away, right? So those customer conversations sometimes go idle in our agent queues, and they sit there. But guess what? That's taking up space for them helping somebody else. So what we did is we built in a lobby that said, okay, after 25 minutes of idleness, we're gonna pull you out so the agent can help somebody else, and wait on somebody else. And then if that customer comes back, because we ask, like, do you still need help? We'll put you back into a queue with somebody who is available. And then we did enhance our predefined content for agents. So agents have predefined scripts, they can click a button, it populates in for them. So again, the agent tools. So this is an example of 1.0 Zell flow. I told you that it was the Zelle help, this is all it was. You can easily read it, right? We spent months, and this is what Zelle looks like today. If I were to print this out on a plotter, and we have, it prints out to be about 40 feet worth of content to actually be able to read it. So again, talking about the complexity, and we're really looking at how do we really help a customer and make sure they get to the right spot and not just gloss over with really easy Q&As.
Do you ever see, either with Jeanie here or with peers, them using these types of chat bots to alleviate something like the error resolution burden, right? So like customers who are disputing something, it can be painful to wait for credit or to reach a decision.
Oh, you're asking about what's gonna be my 2025. I've been asked to go into the disputes department. Yeah.
Yeah, and I should just say, like, I spent some time at Fifth Third with the disputes department.
Okay.
And this
So
was
you're
always
way familiar. We
Yeah,
had
yeah,
an in-depth
I was,
conversation.
well, I was curious coming in to see if that was a topic, because I remember
Yeah.
the same burden
Yep.
with like call wait times.
Yep.
In thinking that like an automated
Yep.
type of solution may.
So we're actually looking at what our opportunities exist. When it comes to like disputes, so for those who don't know, you get a fraudulent transaction or something that you don't know that you recognize, you wanna dispute it. Super common these days, where we take about 1.5 million calls a year just on disputing transactions. And part of that is because for us right now, all roads point into that department. And it's separate from our call center. If you want to dispute a transaction today in Jeanie, she's giving you a phone number. Now, what we are launching by the end of this month, which I'm super excited, to your point, if you have filed a dispute, and it's a debit or an ACH, and you're trying to just figure out the status, Jeannie's gonna be able to give you at least a status as of that morning.
Yeah, the status check calls are like.
There's about 30,000 a month,
Yeah.
just on status checks, right? And it's partially because of the process, it's partially because we're trying to still digitize some things here. One of the things I've been asked to look at is their opportunity to digitize our intake process. Other banks are doing it. It's a hit or a miss because you have to balance, like, quite honestly, getting crap disputes with real disputes. So it's just, there's a lot to work through.
Cool.
So I think one of the other big things that's really important as you're thinking about this, again, Reagan talked about earlier, you build models, nobody uses it. If they do use it, it's really important to figure out how are you measuring success. And I know I've been guilty of this before. I'm like, this seems really cool, let's just do it. And this is where my partner Whitney, she's a black belt in Lean Six Sigma, and she's like, cool, but we gotta be able to measure it. Like, so how are we gonna do that and figure that out before we go live? So just showing some of our success with Jeanie and how we're looking at it. So we had, our vendor came in and did a business review earlier this year and said out of 18,000 brands, your NLU is the best that we have, and we don't even know how to measure you against other ones, which is pretty cool. My boss really enjoyed that because he is a data scientist, and so he takes immense pride that we figured out and cracked our code. We get about 239,000, so this is as of the end of July. We, I will tell you, September I think was one of our better numbers, and I don't have that number off the top of my head, but the total conversations that are coming in, we were able to classify 93% of those conversations, and of those 93%, 93% were accurate. Again, people hitting that yes button. The other cool thing with building out flows, so we don't have flows built out for all 150 of our intents. There are ones where we have to put you into with an agent just because it takes time. But 41% of our conversations are able to stay within Jeanie. So Jeanie is able to either help service or get them to the right spot. And when I say get them to the right spot, that's because 10% of those conversations, we have to give a phone number largely to our disputes department. But the other 31, we're either able to help or, get them to the right spots, which is pretty cool. And then this is just a quick, because I was using the Zelle analogy all the way through, you can see kind of volumes that come in for the different intents.